Hey, welcome in everybody to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247 Sports. Eric, how are you doing this August 13th, 17 days from us being in the press box at the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio?
Chip Brown, happy Wednesday. As you noted, we are 17 days away, as you said, from being at Ohio Stadium. The massive showdown, Chip. Feels like you can't turn on the TV this time of year, anything sports related, anything college sports related, and not hear about Texas at Ohio State. Certainly excited. And as you noted, it is August 13th, which means, Chip, it's 813 day. And you may be asking, what's 813 day? 813, the area code of one, Tampa, Florida, Hillsborough County. There you go. Chad Scott. You got plenty of 813 connections. The Longhorns. You got Chad Scott. When I mentioned being a Tampa native, he shouted out being from the 813. Of course, you got Grayson Littleton from the 813 as
Grayson Littleton.
Happy
Wiregrass Ranch.
Wiregrass Ranch. Happy 8.
Why do they call it Wiregrass?
Chip, you know what's interesting? That area, it's kind of like an area, it's a new area that like blew up. So I don't know if there'd be anything analogous in Austin, Chip, but you kind of get like these new suburbs, right? I feel like it's more of like a North Texas thing, right? That these suburbs kind of like a South Lake, right? That just spring up and then it comes with a name. So that's kind of the deal with Wiregrass Ranch. That area was more or less Wesley Chapel, and it wasn't much of anything. And they're just like, hey, we're going to build out here and we need a name, Wiregrass Ranch. So that's how it happened. It's not particularly ranchy, but that's how it happened.
Okay. I didn't know if wiregrass was a unique kind of grass to Florida.
Nah, that's just a thing.
Just a name. Just a name. All right. Well, we have much to get into in this week's episode of the Flagship Podcast. Texas has had a scrimmage, a meaningful scrimmage, and we've gotten Steve Sarkisian's thoughts about that scrimmage. We also have Eric's position rankings, his confidence rankings in each position with the Texas Longhorns. We'll get into that. John Mateer, the quarterback at Oklahoma, the savior, apparently had a Venmo message that said something along the lines of betting on the USC-UCLA game back when he was at Washington State. So we'll get into that as well. Eric, let's start off with the first scrimmage of training camp. And this was a scrimmage that Steve Sarkisian said was very competitive. There were highlights for the offense, including a couple of long drives in 2 minutes. There was some success by the offense in what they call their red zone lockout, where it was ones versus ones from the 25. Texas the offense ran the ball. CJ Baxter scored behind the left side of the line. Neto Umazulu and Trevor Gooseby from 3 yards out. In the second ones versus ones possession, Arch Manning hit Ryan Wingo for a 20-yard touchdown pass. And then in the third, they drove to the 10. The drive stalled, and Will Stone missed a 27-yard field goal. Now, Mason Shipley, the Texas State transfer, ended up kicking both of the game-winning field goals at the end of the scrimmage following the 2-minute drives. So I think it's fair to say Mason Shipley has established himself as the leader for the field goal kicking chores. I also heard his kickoffs were nice and deep into the end zone for touchbacks. I know Sark keeps talking about Will Stone on kickoffs, but it sounds like Mason Shipley's kickoffs were just fine. Your thoughts, Eric?
Couple things, Chip. One, I'm going to have to try really, really hard this year to not call Mason Shipley Mason Crosby, because that's where my brain went immediately. So I'm going to have to try to work on that. There's the first thing. I'll come back to the kicking thing in a second. I think there's an interesting question that I want to run by you in terms of coming out of the scrimmage. First things first, it stood out to me, no injuries, no major injuries. A couple guys were nicked up, but as Steve Sarkisian said, they returned to practice. Nick Brooks. Chip, I'm forgetting the other one. Who's the other name he mentioned?
Townsend.
Townsend. Nick Townsend. But both back in practice. So that's the first thing, right? No injuries. No one is banged up. No one's fighting anything that could linger, because we're at the point, Chip, as we open the show 17 days away. Now you're at the point where, like, if you get nicked up here, it could be a thing that lingers into the year, right? It's not like, all right, we can sit him for a week or so and rehab. It could be a thing that lingers into the season. So you're definitely glad you walk away injury free. Yes, sure, it's encouraging for Texas fans to hear red zone success. How many times, Chip, did we hear over the last 2 years the defense talking about red zone lockout, right? Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, Jalen Ford, Anthony Hill. We heard a lot about the defense having success in red zone lockout. Well, it's nice to hear the offense having some success in red zone lockout as well. I wrote about this. Actually, I did not write about this in 4 Downs. I wrote about it in my confidence each position article. Encouraging to hear CJ Baxter, right? That he had a good day. Because, Chip, I don't know if you see it this way, and then I'll ask this question and get to the points to make about the kicking. Listen, Steve was adamant to want to, point out the progress in science, right? In modern medicine. I'm all for it, right? Yes, I understand that in 2025, an Achilles or the type of injury that CJ Baxter had, it's not a career ender. It's something you can come back from. But let's not assume that everyone's going to be, I'm trying to think of, I was going to say Kevin Durant, but even Kevin Durant, it took him a little over a year and change to get back from his Achilles, right? Aaron Rodgers, let's not assume that everyone can just get back in 7-8 months and hit the ground running. I think with CJ Baxter and Christian Clark, maybe through, I don't know, week 6, week 7, week 8, the midway point in the year, they're going to be good days and bad days, Chip. That's just the way I see it until proven otherwise. And I'm not doubting the recovery of those guys. It's just those are major injuries, both physically and mentally. Good to hear that CJ Baxter had a good day. I don't want to take that as, okay, he's back, right? Because you could have a day tomorrow where he looks like a guy who's recovering from a major injury. Same with Christian Clark. So there's that thought. And Chip, with the kicking game, I don't know if you see it this way. In the NFL, of course, they're kind of having a deal where, some of the kickoffs, they're want to have them in play because of the rule change there, right? Where the kickoff, goes out further. Obviously, that's not a deal in the college game. But I'm just asking you a hypothetical. And I probably should have asked this to Jeff Banks when we had the opportunity. Won't have an opportunity until January. So probably should have asked him then. Chip, when you have such a dynamic special teams unit, right? Kick coverage. You talk about some of the athletes, guys that are on kick coverage that are standing out. I wonder if there's any benefit to maybe giving some of these guys, not saying every returner, but for the most part, giving some of these guys an opportunity to leave the kick in play, and maybe some of your coverage units can force a fumble, do something. I know that sounds maybe a little bit analytical. Maybe we're overthinking it, right? Maybe there's just benefit in just booting through the back of the end zone. But I don't know, Chip. That's just a thought that crossed my mind. So I'll let you respond in kind to what I said there.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see the college game go to the NFL rule. Yeah, I mean, it's great right up until that guy gets loose for a 97-yard kick return for a touchdown. But I think we talked about this a little bit coming out of the interviews with the coordinators, Jeff Banks saying maybe there'll be more of a pressure unit on punt returns, as opposed to trying to set up the return, go after the punt block, which they did not have a single punt block last year for the first time in the Steve Sarkisian era. And Jeff Banks said, hey, we lost some guys who were stars for us on special teams. We were kind of in a transition year last year. But if you're talking about being a pressure unit, it means you like the guys you have coming off the edge, or you got guys who can gap shoot. A couple of years ago, it was Michael Taft and Keelan Robinson, who were kind of the designated punt blockers, and they would come from, different places wherever they saw the weakness in the opponent's punt protection. So be interesting to see what elements we get from special teams. But I know this, Eric, if you've got a championship level defense and you've got a really good punter and a really good field goal kicker, you can survive. Mm-hmm. You can win games 10-9. You can win games 12-10. And Jack Bomeister got rave reviews for his performance in the scrimmage. One source told me a couple of punts with nearly 5 seconds of hang time. You will take that. And he's angling them. And so that's good news, because that was a weakness last year, obviously. They gambled a little bit with Michael Kern, who had a groin injury kind of to start the year. Then he kind of leveled off, did okay. Now he's punting at Cal. So we'll see. We'll see what special teams brings. A couple other nuggets from the scrimmage. Ethan Burke had a tipped pass that led to an interception by Ty Anthony Smith. Ty Anthony Smith getting a lot of praise for his performance so far in training camp. And the defensive backs had good coverage for the most part. The one tipped pass interception, that was the one turnover from Saturday. I believe that was Arch Manning, by the way. I know Steve said no turnovers for him, but then he said there was a tipped pass interception. But Arch Manning, they had a designed run for him where he picked up 25 yards. And then he had a play where his receivers were covered downfield and he scrambled for a first down. So the legs of Arch Manning are going to be a factor this season. And I wrote this week, if they want to beat Georgia, Arch is going to have to run, because all the teams that gave Georgia trouble in the last 2 years have had quarterbacks who could make plays with their legs, Eric.
Chip, I want to ask you this. I actually was going to try to look at the transcript really quick, but I can do it on the fly here. Didn't Steve say that? I know I've heard him say this at one point in time in the offseason. I can't remember if it was when we spoke on Monday, that he doesn't expect any of his quarterbacks to have a PhD in running. What was that? The verbiage?
Yeah, they're not going to major in that.
Major in it. Okay. So here's the question I want to ask you, right? And I guess I'll give my thoughts first before I ask the question. I agree with you. Listen, you don't, buy a Ferrari, you don't buy a Porsche to drive at 20 miles an hour, right? And maybe I'm telling on myself there. Not that I own either of those cars, but I do own a Mustang. But you're going to use Arch Manning to the best of his capabilities, right? Is he going to be Cam Newton? I guess I'll use a wholly dated reference here, and I'm probably dating myself. Is he going to be Eric Crouch? Right? No. All right. Like that's always the first example that comes back to me. I think it's just like a wholly running quarterback. They're better examples. Sorry, Eric Crouch, picking on you. No, right? Like that's not going to be the offense, but you're going to utilize his legs. The question I have for you, Chip, is this: Does any part of this feel? And I think Steve, for the most part, is a pretty transparent guy. I mean, I think he answers questions honestly without tipping his hand. Is there any part of this that feels like Steve's just playing it close to the vest because he doesn't want to come out and say, yeah, we're going to use him in goal line. We're going to use him in red zone. We're going to do this and do that. And does any part of it feel that way? Or is it kind of like a half truth in that, yes, we're not going to make, like, he's not going to be, this isn't going to be an option offense, right? Hence we're not going to major in running, but you still leave that little bit of wiggle room. Is that fair, Chip?
Yeah. I mean, I think you look at some of the quarterbacks out there. Josh Allen's probably an extreme, but Patrick Mahomes is a guy who can just make some things happen with his legs here and there. I think that's what we're looking at with Arch Manning. I mean, we saw him run the 15-yard touchdown run against Texas A&M, where he's takes a hit, stays inbounds, kind of tiptoes down the sideline, gets in. I think those are the kind of plays. I thought we would see more of those plays. I thought we would see more of it in the SEC championship game in overtime, or even before overtime, but didn't happen. I think, now that Steve Sarkisian has Arch Manning as his quarterback, he's got all those things at his disposal. I would hope that Arch Manning's legs will be involved in the goal line situations. Give me a run pass option that taxes the defense. Give me a little bootleg, a little waggle. I mean, let's go. So yeah, I'm very, very intrigued to see how Steve Sarkisian utilizes Arch Manning's legs, because are there new wrinkles that Steve Sarkisian can bring to that part of the game? I don't know. How much has he been studying that stuff? Does he look at Jalen Hurts? Does he, what's he looking at? Steve Sarkisian was the play caller in the Alabama-Clemson national championship game when Jalen Hurts ran it in for a touchdown with about a minute left. So he's had some experience with guys who can make some plays with their legs. Very intrigued to see how he does it with Arch Manning. But there is a commonality among the teams that have given Georgia problems, Eric, and it's having a quarterback who can make some plays with his legs, not be, Vince Young, just maybe a little Colt McCoy-esque in that.
Chip, I want to add one quick thing, because I just been thinking about it as you've been talking. And again, I'm not recalling every single play from scratch here, so forgive me. I'm sure someone out there will point to and say, no, you're wrong. But in thinking about Arch Manning specifically in the red zone and goal line, when the windows get tighter, defenses, everything gets more compressed. Chip, I don't remember. Obviously, the A&M score is the most notable. I know they tried to do some things against Georgia. Do you recall a short yardage / red zone scramble / run by Arch Manning that went between the tackles? Because I don't. I remember it all being quarterback kind of sweeps. And I'm only mentioning that because I am curious to see, with Arch Manning now being the QB1, you want to limit how many hits your quarterback takes, right? And you certainly aren't trying to. I guess I was thinking about the goal line quarterbacks, guys like Cam Newton, guys who are bigger. And Arch is a big man. He is 6'5", 220 pounds, but he's not, a freak of nature. He's not 6'5", 240, 245, right? Chip, am I remembering that correctly? Because I don't remember there being like a quarterback power. I remember them being mostly sweeps. And I guess I'm just thinking, go ahead, Chip. Go ahead.
There were a couple sneaks that were over the guard. I think against Mississippi State, maybe one against Colorado State.
Yeah.
There were a couple sneaks. One where I remember Sark kind of griped at him, like, make sure you're over the line and you stay there where the refs can see you over the line.
Right.
Don't be getting up early, where there's a question, because I think he made it in on his second try. But
yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, though that was like from 1 yard out.
So yeah, that's just a thought in my brain that goes, all right, if you're using Arch down in that area, you're not trying to line up in pistol or line up in a shotgun type of formation, have your guy get smacked running up the middle, right?
Get under center.
So get under center, do it that way. So that's just another thought.
And I think they are working on that more.
Yeah.
So that's what I've heard. We'll see. Eric, we've got anything else from the scrimmage that stands out? The tight ends had a good day. Jack Endries, Jordan Washington. Emmett Mosley was not much of a participant in this. So Parker Livingstone got a lot of reps, and Parker Livingstone had a good day. And Aaron Butler was making some plays with the second and third team offense, which is good to hear because right now I think it's pretty clear the top 4 receivers on the team are Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, Emmett Mosley the 5th, and Parker Livingstone. So, and look, we've seen seasons where Sark has pretty much relied on just 3 receivers. So that's probably, having 4 is a bit of a luxury.
Chip, this isn't from the scrimmage. I believe it's from the practice following the scrimmage. Manny Muhammad, Chip, Steve Sarkisian said he had a couple of picks. That to me is just encouraging because I don't think we can underscore this enough. And that's why I asked Manny the question when we spoke with him, I believe it was last week. What's the ceiling for you? Like, what's next, right? Because right now, Malik Muhammad is a solid SEC cornerback, right? But we all know the potential is there for him to be elite, right? I'm not saying he has to be Jahdae Barron, year 1 and win the Jim Thorpe Award, but are we seeing that potential, right? So when I heard Manny Muhammad's name as a guy who had a couple picks, again, I wasn't from the scrimmage. I was from, I believe, the following practice after the scrimmage, but that was encouraging to hear because I want to see him be that ball hawk for Texas this year.
Yeah. Malik Muhammad, Jalen Gilbo, Kobe Black, Warren Roberson. These are guys who are having a good training camp. So does Dwayne Akina, who has a reputation for rotating guys, if they've earned his trust, he plays them. How much of a rotation will there be at corner with this year's team? We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, a lot of talk about Grayson Littleton and Wardell Mack battling out at the star, but with Derek Williams coming back strong and healthy, he also got praise for his scrimmage from Steve Sarkisian. Do they move Jelani McDonald to nickel? If that's getting their 5 best on the field, we'll have to see there as well. So position flexibility, depth, those are good things to have. And Michael Taft has been working at nickel some. So is he, it's hard for me to believe that Michael Taft as the sort of quarterback of the secondary and being able to see everything from the safety position, it's hard for me to believe he wouldn't be at the safety position, but they've got position flexibility. So we'll see how that plays out.
Can I say something that really quick, Chip? I'm glad you mentioned that because I did a radio hit the other day, and that was the main point that I was emphasizing with Taft, is that I'm not doubting Michael Taft's ability, right? If you're doubting Michael Taft at this point, you should know his story. Walk on to All-American. But I do think one of the strengths of Michael Taft's game, or really any standout safety, is the ability to be that last line of defense and see everything in front of you and call it out to your guys. And I'm sure Taft would be more than capable. We saw Jahdae Barron, right, be excellent at communicating at star. So I'm sure he could do it from that first line of defense where that star lines up. But that's an interesting point to me. And, again, we don't have to belabor this. There's obviously a lot to get to. But I am intrigued by the idea of playing multiple guys at star, right? As Chip has highlighted, done an excellent job highlighting throughout camp, position flexibility, especially on defense. Is there more of a benefit to, hey, as Steve Sarkisian said, I can stick Jelani McDonald if we need a bigger nickel in there, or I can do Grayson Littleton, Wardell Mack, Michael Taft. Maybe that allows you to get different guys in different spots. I don't know. I think that's something, Chip, that, to be completely honest, and again, you did a great job profiling this. This was, 2 years ago, if memory serves me correct, when we were talking about, kind of some of the play at safety, some of the play at edge, right? When guys like Ethan Burke would come off the field, when guys like, Jalen Catalon was still in the mix at safety, and Jaron Thompson, so on and so forth, right? I think it'll take a few games to see, hey, is there benefit in this mixing and matching, or is it this is clearly your guy who is giving you the most production? So I think it'll be interesting to see that play out, Chip.
Yeah, no question about it. And that kind of depth comes in handy. You're trying to disguise, you're trying to confuse the quarterback. That that helps, especially when you're going up against possibly a first-time starter in Julian Sayin, or my man Keinholz, Lincoln Keinholz, who's more of the athletic quarterback for Ohio State. But most seem to think it'll be Julian Sayin, the passer, who went to Alabama, and then Nick Saban retired, so he transferred to Ohio State. Eric, let's get into your position rankings, because you put one out before training camp. Now you're at the midpoint of training camp. We'll go from least confident to most.
Sure.
You are least confident in the offensive line.
And again, just so this is clear, this is confidence relative to the team, okay? It's not that I don't think this offensive line could gel and blossom into something, but let's just call a spade, Chip. How many times have we heard this offseason, specifically in camp, defense is ahead of the offense? You look at the defense, and we'll get to the rankings there. Spoiler alert, the top 5 of my rankings, they're all defensive positions, all right? Because this defense, I think, is going to be stand out. So it's relative to the team. But yes, offensive line remains at 10. I had it at 10 entering the year. I still think it's the biggest, that's a question mark, but, thing to keep an eye on to see how things evolve. And yes, I do think when you have an injury to a Andre Kojo, who at best case would have been your starting right tackle, best case scenario for him, at bare minimum, he would have been your third tackle, right? It affects depth. And I do want to emphasize this, Chip. I think Cole Hudson was Cole Hudson was a bit of an outlier last year in terms of how much he played at guard, right? Rotating in with DJ Campbell and others. That third tackle, when the spot is healthy, so you go back to 2023 when Christian Jones and Kelvin Banks were basically mainstays there, that third tackle is only going to see between 150, 200 snaps a year, right? And the majority of that's going to come, no disrespect, against Sam Houston, San Jose State, if you're taking care of business. So it's not like it's, oh my goodness, this is a rotational defensive tackle type of aspect. But Chip, you saw what happened in 2024. Kelvin Banks goes down, Cam Williams goes down. You need a tackle who can step in. And I don't think the expectation could be that Trevor Gooseby, right, the way that he played against some of the standout edge players in the nation, that's going to be the expectation. So anyhow, that's why I have it at 10. You got a couple of injuries, a lot of young guys there. So I want to see how that progresses. At number 9, I went with tight end. It dropped from 7. Again, I'll be quick. It has nothing to do with tight end. It has more to do with the way that some of the other positions have kind of progressed throughout camp. Still think Jack Endries is going to be an all-conference player. I still think Jordan Washington, Spencer Shannon, reason for optimism. It's just because of how some of the other positions have developed, and the fact, Chip, as Steve Sarkisian noted, Jack Endries is 9 or 10 practices into his Texas career. All right, so still some things there. I'll quickly go through 8 at receiver. That one bumps up a notch.
Oh, real quick on tight end.
Go for it, Chip. Sorry, stop me.
Sarkisian is so pleased with what he's seeing from guys like Jordan Washington, Amari Winston, Spencer Shannon, Nick Townsend, that he's talking about having multiple personnel groupings for 12 personnel when they go to 2 tight ends, which I think is a good sign. So go ahead.
No, completely agree. At 8, I have wide receiver, which goes up a spot. The main reason for that, Parker Livingstone. Right? The emergence of him. You're starting to hear other names, right? It was just Dalen McCutcheon we were hearing early on. Now you're hearing Aaron Butler and others. So some of that depth, it kind of, materializing, that to me is encouraging. I'll spend most of my time here, Chip, explaining the number 7 spot, which is quarterback. That one I think was most confusing to folks for the first edition because I had it at 6, and they're like, man, you're going to feel real stupid when you see how Arch Manning. This isn't specific to Arch Manning. It's the room as a whole. And this is where I would love to get your thoughts, Chip. We heard Steve Sarkisian talk about needing more consistency from Trey Owens, right? One play, he can look like, a supremely talented quarterback. The next play, you need a little more consistency. He highlighted that. He talked about Matt Caldwell leading 2 drives. I think one was it's almost 13 plays.
13 and then 16 plays.
Right, 16 plays. So he talked about that, right? But Matt Caldwell, again, only 9-10 practices into his Texas career. Arch Manning, if Arch Manning were the entire quarterback room, I'd probably put it top 5. But still feels like you have question marks about QB2. Is that what you took away from Steve Sarkisian's comments, Chip?
Yeah, I mean, that battle continues with Trey Owens and Matt Caldwell. I think what I've heard from sources is Trey Owens needs to be pushed. He does better when he's being pushed. If he feels like he's got it in the bag, he can relax, and they don't get the best performance out of him every time. So basically, Trey Owens sounds like a gamer to me, but we'll see. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a sense that if you have 2 quarterbacks fighting it out for the number 2 quarterback position, you might not have one, but I think there's reason to believe there's cause for concern if something happens to Arch Manning. Again, I'll go back to that. It's good to have a good defense, a good punter, and a good field goal kicker. But yeah, I think you can say the talent, the first string talent is off the charts, or you hope it is. And then after that, it's a bit of a mystery.
At number 6, I went with running back. I talked a little bit about some of the logic there, bumping it down a couple spots, just because CJ Baxter, Christian Clark, I think these guys are going to have good days and bad days, right? Until we can see it, at least for me, or maybe not see it, because the last time I'm going to do this is going to be prior to the first week to opening the season opener. If we can hear it from Steve Sarkisian, that he feels he's consistent production from those guys, in addition to the Jarrett Gibsons, the Ricky Stewarts, James Simons, right? Quintrayvon Wisners. That's why I have it at 6. But again, Chip, I don't know if you feel the same way. The biggest jump for me was defensive tackle. And I think, I may have viewed it erroneously. I felt like, man, Texas doesn't have anyone who's played the number of snaps that your starters at defensive tackle, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, have played over the last 2 years. But as Kenny Baker kind of talked about, and Steve Sarkisian openly said, maybe it's not about having those 2 guys who play as many snaps and then the rest of the guys fill in as much as it's like a hockey shift, right? We can throw 2 guys in, 2 guys out, 3, 4, 5 guys, whatever, right? Maybe it's viewing it that way. When I heard that in conjunction with seeing, Chip, how impressive these guys look from a physical perspective, defensive tackle moves up quite a few spots, Chip, for me.
Yeah, and I think that's been are you kidding me? I mean, you go get 5 defensive tackles out of the portal, and you may have hit on all 5. Typically you go get 5 and you hope you landed 3. But if they hit on all 5, then you throw those 5 in with Alex January, then you're right. You've got and Steve Sarkisian said, these guys look interchangeable to me. It doesn't matter who they put out there. If it's Travis Shaw and Hero Kanu for a few snaps, then it's Cole Brevard and Alex January for a few snaps, and then it's Murad Watson and Levon Johnson for a few snaps. If these guys all look the same and perform the same, that's ridiculous and is a massive sign of good news for Texas, because we already know the edge room and linebackers have all American players in their rooms. So that's very encouraging.
I'll round out the list here just for the sake of time. 4 through 1 goes cornerback. Yeah, so cornerback at number 4, edge at number 3, safety at number 2, linebacker at number 1. Chip, with cornerback, I was a little bit hesitant in that first one. I think I had cornerback at 6. Hearing Manny Muhammad, I still feel is a known commodity, right? So I talked about him earlier in the show. Jalen Gilbo, while it still remains to be seen how he'll fare in making that move outside, I feel Gilbo is a bit of a known commodity. But it was those guys past that, the Kobe Blacks, Wardell Max, the Adrian Santana Wilson, I guess he's going by, so apologies to Santana there. Adrian Wilson was one of my favorite NFL players, Chip. So I'm going to have to refrain from that. Hell of a safety with the Cardinals.
Yeah, Santana's dad, safety with the Cardinals.
Correct. Santana Wilson, Kobe Black, Warren Roberson, right? How would those guys fare? And I know you're hearing similar things, Chip, that they are very high on this cornerback room. And we're starting to hear some of those other names, right? Like a Santana Wilson and others from Steve Sarkisian. So that's why Cade Phillips. I almost forgot about Cade Phillips, that length, right? At cornerback. So that's why that position moved up there. And like I said, there was nothing that's going to change in terms of this edge room, barring injury. Knock on wood. There's nothing that's going to happen between now and the end of camp that's going to change my thoughts on this edge room, this linebacker room, this safety room. You have all Americans at each level, right? So again, for those who feel I'm being a little hard on the offense, look at it that way. If I have a guarantee, someone that you feel can walk in right now and be all American at each one of those spots, it's kind of hard to come off those, Chip.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think Texas has the best edge room in the country. And if Texas stays healthy at linebacker with Anthony Hill Jr. on the field, they're in the mix for the best linebacker room in the country. Now, a lot of good linebackers out there, but let's see how that plays out. So I think that's solid.
Chip, real quick, you addressed this in the show earlier, but I'll throw it up here. You want to address this real quick because you obviously mentioned it.
Yeah, so we don't have official word from Ryan Day that it's going to be Julian Sayin or my man Lincoln Kineholtz. They're still duking it out, but if you are following along at bucknuts.com, the Ohio State site, and make sure you take advantage of this 50% off annual membership special that we have going on right now. Just go to horns247.com and jump on that because good heavens, folks, Texas is preseason #1 for the first time in program history. But you can also, if you become an annual member, not a monthly subscriber, if you're an annual member, you get VIP access to all the sites on the preeminent 24/7 sports network. So make sure that you take advantage of that right now because it's like buying a latte for a month. One latte, you're going to get all the information on your, Texas Longhorns. So yes, take advantage of that. But Ohio State has not yet named its quarterback. And maybe they won't until they walk out on the field on Saturday, August 30th. But Julian Sayin versus Lincoln Kineholtz. Julian Sayin, more the pocket passer. Lincoln Kineholtz, kind of the Will Howard passer runner. So would Will Howard be a good comparison for Arch Manning? In terms of how much running?
You know what, Chip? My gut, my visceral reaction is that I think Will Howard did a little more running than Steve Sarkisian would desire Arch Manning to do. But the only thing that gives me pause there is maybe there is a game, Chip, Georgia. Listen, it shouldn't be San Jose. I got to stop crapping on those G5 schools because I covered G5 for 6 years, but you get the point. It shouldn't be San Jose State or Sam Houston that Arch is having to bust out, and run 15 times. But maybe, Chip, against Georgia, it's like, all right, we know what we need to do. That's
Georgia, Florida.
Right. Then Arch taps into Will Howard. He's running maybe, a dozen times, 15 times. That's the way I see it.
Okay. And Steve Sherlock says Joe Burrow. Maybe Arch Manning runs about as much as Joe Burrow. Okay, that's fair. Joe Burrow had a very similar track as Sam Ehlinger, except Joe Burrow was a way better passer. Way. No offense to Sam, but that's just the facts. So, all right. Let's see. What else do we need to touch on here before we get into the John Mateer situation. So John Mateer transfers from Washington State. Oklahoma brings in his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle from Washington State. This is the Clark Lee Vanderbilt approach. We want the quarterback. We want the offensive coordinator. We want the whole package. Well, earlier this week, someone went through John Mateer's Venmo and found a post where it said betting USC versus UCLA. And this would have been while he was at Washington State. And I believe it was a couple of years ago, so it would have been when USC and UCLA were still in the Pac-12. Nonetheless, John Mateer came out and said, this was what did he say was a joke or something? But Eric, Hunter Deckers at Iowa State got caught up in, remember when the Iowa Gaming Commission ran a check of all the student athletes at Iowa and Iowa State, and Hunter Deckers and then we never saw him again. He went to camp with the New Orleans Saints, but he never took another snap at Iowa State. And I'm sure that's the worst fear scenario for Oklahoma, because this guy is supposed to be the savior of the OU offense. I'm very high on John Mateer. I compare him to Sam Leavitt at Arizona State. Eric, your thoughts?
Real quick, I will read the statement in part from John Mateer. The allegations that I once participated in sports gambling are false. My previous Venmo descriptions did not accurately portray the transactions in question, but were instead inside jokes between me and my friends. I have never bet on sports. Again, it's a longer statement, so that's the crux of it, right? He denies the allegation, says they're inside jokes.
Inside jokes.
Yeah. Here's my thoughts. I wrote about it a little bit in 4 Downs. Check it out. And I probably should have listed the most, I don't know, the most recent example, but the most pertinent example of college football that Chip mentioned in Hunter Deckers, right? I talked about, guys in professional ranks, hope Chip doesn't, take the shot to the heart, but his Detroit Lions, Jameson Williams, right, got popped amongst a few other NFL players. Jonte Porter in the NBA. You just saw the guy from Detroit. I'm forgetting his name right now. Malik Beasley, right? It caught up in it as well. I only make those points is to say, Chip, these are all guys outside of Beasley who are 24, who at the time of their, getting caught up in this were 24 years old or younger. So don't think that, we're talking about people who are college age who can get caught up in this situation. So it's a serious issue. Hope, Texas and others are taking the steps to kind of keep their programs insulated. In specificity to what you said about Mateer, I don't see it getting to this point, Chip, because, Chip, do you think it's worth it explaining kind of, here's the deal, okay? If you go on a betting app, right, this isn't quite, guys who've been suspended in years past because you saw the bet slip from the casino and you have that proof, right? Or you saw the slip from the app, because now in today's day and age, you don't even need to go to the casino. You can do it from your phone, right? Or, sorry, Chip, Jameson Williams was placing
James Williams. He made a bet from the Lions facility.
There we go. I didn't want to misspeak. Making the call from the Lions facility, right? It's not quite that. I'm sorry, Chip. Chip, Venmo, you can't, barring something else coming out of this, Chip, you can't really prove that these were bets, right? Unless the bookie comes out and is like, hey, here's some paper trail, right?
Right. It was a bet.
Right, exactly. I could pay back Chip Brown for, 9 beers out on a Friday night and say, hey, Chip, thanks for the, gas money, because I don't want my significant other to know that I had 9 beers out on a Friday night, right? Like, you can't really prove Venmo transactions. So in my opinion, John Mateer is going to be fine. It's just going to be a little bit of egg on the face. But to Chip's point, right, nothing else can come out because it is very serious. And we've seen what happens at Iowa State and at other places.
Yeah. Well, we'll pick this up in Take It or Leave It. You ready for some Take It or Leave It, Eric?
Chip Brown. I'm always ready for some take it or leave it as I take a pregnant pause there so I can insert ads when I do this. I'm always ready for take it or leave it, Chip.
All right. Well, who's serving first?
You're serving to me, Chip.
All right. Eric, Arch Manning will struggle against Ohio State. Take it or leave it.
Chip, my gut says he will. Now, struggle is vague, all right? Do I think he's going to throw 3 interceptions? And do I think this is going to be a repeat of the Georgia game last year, right? Where it didn't matter who was behind center, they struggled. No. But I am being very cautious because I do not think this is going to be Arch against UTSA. I do not think this is going to be Arch against Mississippi State. Could I see it being a version of Arch versus ULM? Yes. And that doesn't mean that Texas can't leave with a victory. But first, start as the QB1 heading into the horseshoe. That feels like a lot, Chip. So again, struggle is subjective. I don't think it's going to be a complete falling on flat on your face, but it wouldn't shock me if this is a, game where Arch throws for less than 200 yards, maybe $175, $180, couple touchdowns, maybe an interception, but Texas leads with the victory.
Yeah, I agree. I've said I think this offense is going to take a minute to get its groove. So if that is encapsulated in Arch Manning struggling against Ohio State, I will just say that I think the offense is going to need a little time to get its groove. If they can find it in Columbus, Ohio, that would be a huge wow and a reason. And look, I don't think Texas is the number 1 team in the country right now. I think it's Clemson. But if the Texas offense finds its groove against Ohio State, maybe I'll reconsider and say, okay, maybe Texas is the number 1 team in college football. So I guess I'll take some form of this. I do think the defense is going to have to carry this team until the offense gets its groove, which should be in the 3 games after Ohio State against San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston. But I'll take some form of this. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 2.
Take it or leave it. Number 2, Chip. Anthony Hill Jr. wins both the Butkus and the Nagurski Awards this year. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I'm going to take this because he should have won it last year. He should have won the Butkus Award last year. But Anthony Hill, the guy is, to me, the best defensive player in the SEC, which is the best conference in college football. So I'm taking this. He had 113 tackles last year, 16.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, an interception. Should have been a pick 6 if Trey Moore doesn't throw a block in the back as Anthony Hill Jr. is crossing the goal line. So I'm taking this, Eric.
Chip, my gut says to take it. I do believe he'll win the Butkus. There are a lot of great defensive players this year, including one in his own team that I think is going to wreck college football in Colin Simmons. That's giving me a little bit of pause. However, I am all in that I do think at the end of the day, Anthony Hill Jr. is going to show I don't want to say doubters because that's the wrong phrase, but he's going to get the recognition he deserves and the recognition he has deserved from last year. And with Texas's success that I think they'll have on the field, I think that'll pave the way for him to win both. So a little bit of pause because I think there's a lot of great defensive players who could win Nagurski. At the end of the day, I'm going to take it, Chip.
I like it. All right, take it or leave it. Number 3. Eric, nothing happens to OU quarterback John Mateer in connection with the possible gambling while he was at Washington State. Take it or leave it.
I'll make it plain and clear. As constituted, if this is all that comes from it, nothing will happen to John Mateer. You cannot prove Venmo transactions in the way that we have seen the alleged Venmo transactions were for gambling. Not saying that they were or weren't. I'm just saying you can't prove that. If something else more concrete comes from this, the bookie goes and says, hey, I got proof, then we have a different conversation. Otherwise, be prepared to see John Mateer against Texas in the Red River Shootout. So I'm leaving it, Chip. What says you?
Well, nothing happens to John Mateer. I'm gonna take that. I think he plays football. I think business as usual. Yeah, they're not going to be able to prove this. So John Mateer will be on the field for the Boomers, in my opinion. All right, kids. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Again, take advantage of that 50% off annual membership promo we have going on. It will not last, so seize it now and follow along on this, what could be very special journey for Texas this year. Certainly going to be intriguing, and we have all the scoop for you. Until next time, for Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. We'll see you over at Horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.